We're all taught that being nice is a virtue, that being helpful and accommodating are some of the best qualities a person can have. And honestly, they are. But what happens when that niceness kind of goes into overdrive? When you become the go-to person for, well, everything, and you start feeling that hidden cost, the burnout, the resentment, and that quiet feeling that you've lost a piece of yourself along the way.
So let me ask you, does this sound familiar? Need an extra set of hands on a work project? Oh yeah, you're the one they call. Can't find someone to help with last-minute plans? They know they can count on you. It's a role so many of us fall into, but constantly being there for everyone else, it leaves you feeling completely drained. That's because saying yes stops being a choice, and it becomes this automatic gut reflex.
I love this quote because it just flips the whole idea of being nice on its head. It suggests that for a lot of people pleasers, it's not just about being kind. It's a form of armor, right? A protective shield we put up to defend ourselves from conflict, from disapproval, or just that deep down fear of being disliked. And that leads us right to the core of the problem, what we can call the yes reflex. You know exactly what I'm talking about. A request comes in, and before you've even had a second to check your calendar or think about what you need, the word yes has already left your mouth. It's this deeply wired habit, and it's the main engine driving that burnout we're all trying to avoid. Okay, so we get the what, but what about the why? Why is it so incredibly hard to break this cycle? Let's dive into the psychology that makes that simple two-letter word, no, feel almost impossible to say out loud. So at the very heart of this behavior is a core personality trait called agreeableness. It's one of the big 5 traits psychologists talk about, and if you're a people pleaser, chances are you score pretty high on it. And in so many ways, it's a huge strength. Agreeable people are often really well liked, they're seen as great team players, and they're valued for creating social harmony. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. When that agreeableness is dialed up way too high, that strength can become a major liability. It leads to having a really tough time setting boundaries, silencing your own voice just to keep the peace, and taking on way, way too much, all because you're terrified of letting someone down. Over time, that doesn't just zap your energy, it can quietly chip away at your confidence. So where does this really deep-seated need to please even come from? Well, psychotherapist Jessica Hunt suggests that its roots often go all the way back to our childhood. Think about it. If you grew up in a home where love or safety felt kind of conditional, where you had to be the good kid or the helpful one to get that acceptance, you learn pretty early on that putting everyone else's needs first is the safest way to go. It becomes a coping mechanism, a strategy for survival and validation. This brings us to a really crucial distinction we have to make. A lot of us tell ourselves that people-pleasing is just us being empathetic, but as Maria Ross, who's an expert on empathy, puts it, when you default to pleasing, it's not empathy at all, it's submission. Empathy is about genuinely trying to understand someone else's point of view. People-pleasing, on the other hand, is driven by your own need, your need to escape the discomfort of a potential fight or rejection. And let's be clear, this behavior isn't harmless. It comes with a steep and often totally hidden price tag. So let's really break down the real-world costs of a life built around that yes reflex. This breaks it down into 4 key costs. First, the most obvious one, burnout and resentment. You're constantly overextending yourself, and after a while, that goodwill just sours. Second, you risk losing your self-identity. When you're always saying yes to other people, you stop asking what you actually want. Third, your kindness can be exploited. People learn pretty quickly that you're the one who can't say no, and some will take advantage of it. And finally, you end up feeling invisible because you basically taught everyone, including yourself, that your needs just don't matter enough to be heard. To put it a little more bluntly, as writer Eileen Cohen says, you can end up being other people's emotional dumpster. You become the go-to fixer for all their problems and, when things go wrong, a really convenient target for their blame. It is an absolutely exhausting and totally unsustainable role to play in any relationship. Okay, so what does breaking this pattern actually look like in the real world? It sounds hard, right? Well, let's check out the story of a writer named Sian Ferguson. She was feeling completely burnt out and decided to try an experiment. For 1 whole week, she would try saying no to everything that didn't line up with her own needs. Her week was basically full of these little tests. On day 1, she turned down an urgent work project. On day 2, she told a relative she couldn't help with a resume right that second. By day 6, she even had to hold her ground when a friend kind of pushed back on her boundary. But by the end of the week, she felt something totally new, empowered and way less stressed. And what's so fascinating is the huge gap between her fear and what actually happened. She was expecting conflict, rejection, disappointment, but what did she get instead? Well, for the most part, people were understanding, they were supportive, and they were respectful. It turned out that the catastrophic reaction she was so afraid of was mostly just in her own head. Science experiment is so cool because it shows that change is actually possible. So how can you start reclaiming your own time and energy? Let's get into some practical, actionable steps you can start taking like today. All right, here's a simple 4-step guide to get you started. First, start small. Seriously, don't try to set some huge boundary with your boss on day one. Practice with low-stakes stuff, like telling a telemarketer no thanks, just to build that confidence muscle. Second, create a pause. When a request comes in, that reflex is to just say yes. You have to fight it. Simply say, let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. That gives you time to actually check in with yourself. Third, reframe the word no. See it not as a rejection of the person, but as an affirmation of your own limits. It's just a neutral response to a question. And fourth, be ready to repeat yourself. If someone pushes back, you don't need a new excuse. Just calmly restate your boundary. Like I said, I'm just not able to commit to that right now. And hey, if you need a place to start, just try this exact phrase. I can't commit to that right now, but I really appreciate you thinking of me. It's polite, it's super clear, and it doesn't over-explain anything. It respects you and it respects the other person. Perfect. Because really, this whole journey isn't just about avoiding burnout. It's about gaining something incredibly positive. The real reward that's waiting for you on the other side is the amazing freedom that comes with learning to say no. Maria Ross just nails it right here. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It is essential self-care. When you protect your own time and energy, you're not shutting people out. What you're doing is making sure that when you do show up for them, you can be fully present, you can be engaged, and you can be truly empathetic because you're not running on empty. So, let's bring this all together, shall we? The number one thing to remember is that boundaries are about self-respect, not disrespecting other people. And yeah, you're probably going to feel guilty at first. That is a totally normal but temporary part of unlearning old habits. But you have to stick with it because that honesty will ultimately make your relationship stronger. And maybe this is the most important takeaway of all. You can be a deeply kind, generous, wonderful person without being a doormat. And that brings us to the final and, I think, most important question. Look, this isn't about changing your entire personality overnight. Not at all. It's about starting small. So just think about it. What is one small no you can say this week to start reclaiming just a little bit of your own time and your own energy? Because that one small step, it really could be the start of everything.